All right, welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. This is part 2 of our November Q&A. Part 1 was on the channel yesterday. As always, we have a ton more questions to cover, so we'll be covering them in this video. So I guess let's get straight into them. This is a great question that I deliberately put in here for Steve because he loves talking about this.
You always get me into trouble.
Yeah,
always.
So good. If you need a budget workstation, is the FX8350 still relevant? All the top boards and DDR3 are cheap. What's your opinion on FX, Steve?
I love the way I'm often called an AMD fanboy. I love it because the people that say that must have been snoozing through the entire FX generation because I was the biggest Intel fanboy then, apparently. But for those of you that are maybe new to the channel or aren't familiar with my opinion on the FX series, I really, really disliked AMD's FX series. Loathed it would be a good word. I recommended pretty much anything but. I don't really want to argue with people in the comments because I know I trigger a good many people when I say this, but I feel like the FX series was never worth it at pretty much any price point. It was actually a rare bad product in my opinion. I know there's people out there that disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine, but that's my opinion on it, and it has been since I first reviewed it. I was really worried about Ryzen being the same, but thankfully it wasn't. Ryzen is brilliant. But yeah, if you need a budget workstation, there's just so many better alternatives. I'm sort of pushing people away from, or directing people away from buying the Xeon stuff. I don't think the older Xeon stuff on the LGA 1366 socket's worth it anymore either, because new parts since Ryzen came out, you can buy a second-hand Ryzen 5 1600 or 1800X processor for next to nothing.
Yep.
You can get B350 motherboards or X370 boards really cheap. I saw an X470 board sell for $40 US on eBay not that long ago. So you pick up one of them, you can get a good Ryzen processor for $100. And yeah, I mean, you can get the FX stuff cheaper. Someone will probably just about give you an FX system, but whether you want to run it's another question. But that's the same thing with the Xeon stuff. If you can get a Xeon, memory, motherboard, and processor for like $50 if you get lucky, then sure. But you can't beat that in terms of value. You couldn't pay me to use an FX system. That's just me. I really dislike them. Just my personal opinion from lots of testing. Don't like them. So I'd be getting a secondhand Ryzen rig because they're very cheap now, and I'd rather pay 2-3 times more for that. I think you'd be getting more value for money.
Yep, sounds fine.
Don't ever ask me about the FX series again. I'm done with it.
Okay, this next question is from YouTube.
I'm done. Ask me about FX processors, and then you go to Apple products. I'm done.
All right, Steve's done. Is the iPad Pro really as powerful as a laptop? He's really gone, by the way. He's just left. So this is an interesting question for a number of reasons, because there's always a lot of discussion with iPads. People trying to compare them to laptops, people talking about ARM processors and sort of doing those benchmarks like Geekbench and comparing, how fast is the iPad in Geekbench to an Intel laptop. And I'm not a big fan of comparing those two things for a number of reasons. Firstly, because they both run completely different apps on completely different operating systems. So it's really hard to get like a real world workload that's running on an iPad Pro and you can just run the exact same thing on an Intel processor. ARM processors also have a lot of acceleration built into them, so you're not necessarily using the CPU cores for things like basic video encoding or decoding. They've got a whole bunch of stuff that's accelerated as well. And on top of that, their apps are just built in a completely different way to be much more optimized for the resources that are in an ARM chip. So there's a lot more GPU acceleration. There's a lot more acceleration on those things I was just talking about. So yeah, I just don't think the comparisons that we've got at the moment really are telling us all that much about that comparison. We really need to wait for Apple to put their ARM chip in an actual laptop running the same code, the exact same applications, doing the same thing, to see what the difference is going to be like. Personally, I would think that an iPad Pro would probably struggle with some of the rendering tasks that you can do on a laptop simply because of its power and clock speed limits. They're just fundamental limitations. So yeah, I still think Intel would probably come out more powerful if you compare apples to apples. But really at the moment we're just comparing apples to oranges. So yeah, too hard to say. You can come back now, Steve. We're done.
You promise?
Yeah, I promise.
Are there any more Apple questions?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
I'm not impressed with how this Q&A has been going. All right. All right, I am back. Next question. How does AMD, this better not be FX related, compete with Intel with the same core count, yet much lower clock speeds? Seems like Intel should be far and away better. Well, they kind of are. Uh-oh, did I say that out loud? I meant no. Yeah, in all seriousness, Intel does have a performance advantage because of the clock speed advantage. The way AMD competes is by making their CPUs, well, better value, more affordable, cheaper. That's pretty much that one.
Yeah.
So, for example, if the Ryzen 7 2700X and 8700K, forget about the 9900K, if the 2700X and 8700K were the exact same price or the 8700K was cheaper, then for the most part you'd get that. I mean, it's a bit of an unfair comparison because the 2700X is better in productivity because it does have 2 extra cores. So I suppose a better one would be the 2700X and the 9900K. Same core count, same thread count. If they were even remotely the same price, you would buy Intel. Sorry, AMD fans. That's the truth. It's faster. And assuming the platform costs are the same. So AMD comes out well ahead in that comparison in terms of value, and I would personally buy the 2700X every time. I wouldn't even entertain the 9900K as a consumer because you're paying, well, at least $500 US. I'd get a Ryzen 7 2700. What are they now? Like $250?
Pretty cheap, yeah. Yep,
you get a
very,
cooler
very
as well. Whereas, you have to spend at least $30 for a cooler for the 900K, and then you're not running that anywhere near full performance on a $30 cooler. You're pretty much running it at the 95-watt TDP spec. And then motherboards. You can get a $110 B450 Tomahawk. Fantastic board. That'll take the 2700, no dramas. Whereas you probably want to spend about $60, $70 more on a good Z390 board. So yeah, it just comes down to value.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. Okay, next question. And this one looks to be RTX related. I'm actually surprised, given your video, they haven't all been in some way ray tracing related. Anyway, we'll get to the question. Seeing how the RTX cards struggle to use all the GPU when running DXR, definitely the case. Do you think, say, a TU106 GPU, so for those of you that aren't familiar, that's the RTX 2070. So the 2070, but with the same amount of RT cores as the 2080 Ti, would that have been a more balanced offering? So I think what he's trying to say here is, would the 2070 have made more sense with the same amount of RT cores that you get in the highest end part?
Yeah, so more RT cores essentially in the 2070.
Which would make the 2070 more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. First of all, adding those extra cores in increases the die size, so they'll cost more to manufacture, and then it'll mean it'll cost more. But let's just say that there's a mythical 2070 that had the same RT cores at the same price.
Yeah.
It would make more sense and would make that card make more sense for ray tracing because you'd actually be less bottlenecked by its complete lack of RT cores like you've currently got. The shader cores in that GPU are just sitting around doing not much in that game because it's just so choked up by trying to do ray tracing on its
Yes, I suppose that's essentially the question. So you would be getting the same performance is what the question is the RT cores bottlenecking the CUDA cores so much that you actually wouldn't see a difference in performance. And I think that's probably the case.
I would say that almost certainly the 2070 would perform like a 2080 Ti if the RT core count was the same. Because not only do we see lower power consumption running the cards with ray tracing, it also gets bottlenecked much more severely the higher the resolution goes. And that tends to indicate that it's not going to be the shader cores that's doing it, simply because it's trying to push out more rays into the scene, and the more rays that you're pushing out, the lower the performance that you get is. So because we're, a 2080 Ti can run at like 20 FPS at best at 4K with the ray tracing in Battlefield 5. So yeah, I would say that would have been a much better balance. It wouldn't have made any sense from a cost perspective because in all the games that don't use ray tracing, that card would have cost more and would have delivered still the same performance as a GTX 1080 at this, but just at a higher price. So yeah, it would have been nice if Nvidia did that, but logistically it's not really possible.
No. Really, they shouldn't have even offered ray tracing on that part, to be honest with you.
That's another question.
That's a whole other question, so let's just move on.
I would certainly hope in a future generation that the RT core count does increase quite significantly with these parts. Shrink to 7nm, maybe they can put a few more in. That would definitely make a sort of that 2070 type product
Then
a better value.
Yeah, a lot more in.
A lot more. Well, yeah, that's true.
Okay, this next question, I actually really like this. So we'll go through that first and I'll sort of explain what he means if you sort of don't get it. What's the best value build? Price isn't a variable since I'm looking for the best value out there out of each part. So planning to pair it with a 1080p 75 hertz ultra wide monitor. So this is kind of where I come at PC hardware from. It's like this person saying they've got whatever money it takes to do it, but they don't want to. They don't want to
bang for your buck.
They don't want to reach the point of diminishing returns and then go
Yeah.
beyond it. They want the best bang for their buck, which is how we review everything, and that's how I want to buy anything in life. So
Yeah, that's what we think most of you guys
Well,
are doing
yeah,
with your buying
it
decisions.
makes sense. I mean, you work for your money, you want it to then get the most value.
Yep.
You want to spend it wisely. So, having said all that,
So we've certainly done a lot of videos on the channel about, best value products for motherboards, CPUs, GPUs. Tend to update those reasonably often.
my best value all-rounder and sub $200 CPU right now is the Ryzen 5 2600.
Yeah.
So short of
definitely.
any Black Friday deals or anything like that, which will have ended by the time this video goes up.
It's been around that $160 price point well before Black Friday, though.
Yes,
so.
and that's right. That's why I brought that price up. So that will continue. So probably Ryzen 5 2600 is best bang for your buck CPU, and it'll go well into the future without problems. Graphics card for 1080p, it's only 75 hertz. Probably like an RX 570.
Yeah, when you look at cost per frame, the RX 570 would have to be up there as the best value overall for how much performance you get from that price. Obviously, while not as good value, at 1440p, an RX 570 is going to struggle a bit.
Sure. I'd go, RX 570 or RX 580 4GB.
Yeah,
they've been ridiculously cheap.
Very good value.
4GB for 1080p, not a problem. You can easily tune settings there to make it not a problem. Ultra wide monitor, that's where I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he already has the ultra wide monitor.
Oh, does he?
So
to pair with.
I think he's more concerned about
right.
the PC components. But again, like I said, if you're at 1440p, you're probably more looking at like Vega 56 or the 1070 Ti, I think was when we last looked at it, both very good value cards. If they're still, the 1070 Ti is still in the market. I mean, that's a situation where they're not the best, absolute best bang for your buck. The RX 570 would be that product.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a 1440p monitor, then you're going to run into problems. So it's kind of, you have to make some design considerations.
Well, for 1080p though.
For 1080p, definitely RX 570. And then for motherboard, well, B450.
Yeah, again, I'd probably get the Tomahawk because then if you want to upgrade to higher end CPUs later on, that won't be a problem. So that's a pretty straightforward
16 gig of RAM as well. It's probably around the mark.
And then alternatively, I'd look for something like maybe a GTX 1060 3GB. I kind of hate recommending the 3GB card because it does have limited VRAM, but it has proven to be really good up
it's
until
good
this
value.
point.
Been good value.
So if you can get one of those really cheap, around the same price as an RX 570, then that might be a good alternative. On the CPU front, though, there's nothing from Intel that competes with the Ryzen 5 2600. I think that's fair to say.
Definitely got performance at the top end, but if you're looking for bang for your buck, it's probably not there.
Yeah. Okay, next question from Good Dog. What do you think Nvidia will or can do to restore consumer trust after the Turing fiasco? Well, I don't think they have to, do they?
They just have to ship a good product.
Yeah, well, has their reputation really been that damaged? I think most people who bought them are loving it.
Yeah, I mean, it's only the sort of a few issues with the 2080 Ti, the RMA type stuff. But then again, that could happen with really any product launch. You could have just a bad batch.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like it may extend beyond a bad batch. I don't know. That's a tough one to put a finger on what's going on there. If you've bought a really expensive graphics card, you've had it die, you've had it RMA'd, that died, then that's probably bad. Depending on what that person's like and how much they loved the card when it finally started working, that might be a customer that's hard to recover, especially if AMD come swinging with a really good 7nm product. But Nvidia are pretty well on top at the moment. They're going to stay on top for the foreseeable, so they can afford a few slip-ups here and there. I mean, if you're selling a graphics card, some people are paying like $1,400.
Yeah.
If you're selling graphics cards for $1,400, you've probably got to... I mean, you're not struggling to sell graphics cards is basically what I'm getting at. But we'll see.
And I mean, a lot of the things ensuring that, we've been criticizing a lot in our reviews and in our follow-up coverage of, things like ray tracing, DLSS, the pricing at launch, all that sort of stuff isn't really like a trust issue because like Nvidia, while, the demos that they showed at launch for ray tracing, it hasn't ended up as impressive. They did actually ship a card that did ray tracing. DLSS, it's probably not as impressive again as they showed, but it is a feature that you can use. It's just those sort of things that...
Well, yeah, and we knew going into it the support was limited and stuff like that.
Yeah, so all those things, companies always try and present their products as best as they can. Nvidia went with a different strategy than usual. They focused more on the features like RTX over just the simple performance improvements over the previous cards. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it is. I don't think those things necessarily hurt trust. It just didn't make the product as good when it came out.
Yeah, if AMD come up with something relatively early next year, which I don't think they will, but
yeah,
without it being towards the end of the year, and then Nvidia also plan a new series on a new process mid-year towards the end of the year, that's probably going to upset a few RTX 2080 Ti investors, especially if the new product is significantly better, which it should be.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with AMD's architecture is that they're still quite far behind on the architecture front. Like, Nvidia's architecture is much more mature. It's much better in terms of even like power consumption on the existing nodes, like 12 nanometers. Nvidia is miles ahead of AMD. So they certainly have a lot of work to do on 7 nanometers, and it'll be very interesting to see how far they can bring it.
A lot of that's down to the process used as well, with Global Foundries being behind TSMC. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Okay, next question. Quite funny because I was commenting to Tim how knackered I am before we started this Q&A. I was falling asleep as we were leading up to it. Not because of your questions, just because...
He's an old man, that's why.
Yeah, well, that's partly because of it, and also because I was up really late last night testing CPU performance in Battlefield 5 multiplayer. Boy, oh boy, is that a chore. Taking me ages. And then the hardware limit thing, which EA hasn't removed from my account, and I'm working with their tech support to try and get it removed, but no updates or progress there. Fingers crossed they can do something for me. Anyway, onto this question that created that little detour. How much sleep do you guys get? With all the benchmark and all, I'm guessing it's better to say it in seconds. Yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, 4 or 5 hours here and there. It depends on what we're doing, really. For like the ray tracing thing, when they enabled that in Battlefield 5 and they happened to do it at like 6 o'clock our time or something. I got testing that at about 10, 11.
Yeah, similar here. Yeah. Had to wait for the update to download. Had to update Windows.
Yeah, we wanted to get that content done the next day, and Tim said, well, we can make it happen if you do the benchmarking and I do all the image quality stuff. So I think I wrapped up the benchmarking the early hours of the morning. And
yeah, same here. I'd got the quality captures done around that point.
And if I go to bed really late for some reason, I just wake up early. It's earlier than I would normally. It's some weird defect I have. So I woke up at like 7 o'clock. I messaged Tim at 7:30 and said, how's it going? And he was awake. He's like, yeah, I'm working on the script now. It's like, you animal. So yeah, depends on what time of year it is and what product launches we have and what's going on. But yeah, we put in a lot of hours.
Okay, another question from our Discord chat. Do you think your testing methodology should be based on the idea that people want to play at high frame rates, like 100 FPS, or that people want to play at the standard 60 FPS?
Well, over the years, I have thought about this sort of thing quite a bit. Basically, I think we don't really want to assume anything. And I think that's the problem a lot of people do. When we test, say, lower end graphics cards with a higher end CPU, they're like, why don't you test? That doesn't make sense. Test with a Core i3. But you're assuming then that everyone's going to use a low end processor. And while it's more likely they're going to use a low end processor opposed to a high end one, you're then assuming that with that graphics card, they're never going to update the processor. Or that they're not going to use medium quality settings. So you obviously can't test every situation, because we'd be testing for 10 times longer than we do, and we already test for an absurd amount of time. So you've got to find some sort of middle ground there that gives you useful information that's also somewhat realistic as well. So with the 60 to 100 FPS, there's not really any point targeting testing methods for 60 FPS, because in my opinion, 60 FPS is like borderline too low.
Yep.
I always target over 100 FPS for your Battlefield 5 type games. But again, I'm not assuming everyone's like me. So we just test a middle ground that makes the most sense. Okay, we're getting near the end here, and we've got a couple of serious questions to get through. Some burning questions. That was a terrible pun. Okay, the question is, how long does it take to make a burrito on the 9900K's IHS while running IDA64? I don't really know how to answer that one.
I mean, it's probably like if you're making a chicken burrito, for example. Does it get hot enough to actually fry chicken on there?
If you had a pan that had it was manufactured to come down to the...
Yeah.
And you're using that as the cooler, you could probably cook an egg.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Well, how many watts does it take to cook an egg?
I don't know, it depends how quickly you want it cooked, because you can cook it low and slow.
True.
So
well,
it just depends.
You can easily, with a bit of voltage, get them up to 200 watts.
Yeah, okay.
So, are we answering this stupid question too technically, or trying to? Yeah.
I think logistically though, the hardest part would be trying to get the pan onto the.
If you're just using the IHS, it would be a long, painful,
and each individual piece of chicken.
It's like you've got that. So yeah. Anyway, let's just move on from that one. Okay, we got a question here from Zero Drive, and Zero Drive is guilty of not watching every single video we make. So,
oh come on, go back and watch all the archive. What are you doing?
Question is RAM speed a large factor for performance in games? 2400 versus 3200 DDR4, for example. Well, I did a video that pretty much compared, though it was actually 2666 and 3200 that I compared, and it was on Intel processors, so it was a video for Intel users, but it somewhat applies for AMD as well. And it's just one of those questions, like a lot of these questions we get asked in a very general manner. It's like, what games are you playing? What CPU? What graphics card? What resolution and quality settings? So, for the most part, it makes no difference at all. If you've got a GTX 1060, then pretty much all other things are irrelevant. It makes no difference. If you've got a GTX 1070 Ti, if you're playing at 1080p, then it can make a difference. If you've got, if you're playing a CPU intensive title. If you're playing a GPU intensive title like Forza Horizon 4, no difference at all. If you're playing Battlefield 5, it will make a bit of a difference. And then if you're using a high-end GPU, then it will tend to make even more of a difference, again, in CPU-intensive titles more so. So it's a very general question, and it really depends on your setup. So if you're using a GTX 1060, then no. If you're using a higher end, say a GTX 1080 or higher, then yeah, it'll start to make a small difference. But watch my video, because I tested medium, high, and ultra quality setting presets. It was about 6 games. So I tested 3 quality presets. I tested 1440p and 1080p, and I tested Core i3, Core i5, and Core i7 processors. We should put a card or something up. Actually, where would they go? Is it that side? Or
I'm not sure. Card? One of the sides.
We'll put a card up somewhere to a link to that video.
Yeah, that's your job.
Okay.
You can do that.
Hopefully, future Steve doesn't forget to do that.
Yep. Okay, another question from our Discord chat. How do you guys feel about Gigabyte advertising their Aorus RAM as high-performance Samsung B-die memory? It technically is B-die, when it has loose CL16 timings and even overclock to the max can't handle tighter CL15. Charging as much as actual high-performance B-die, such as G-Skill Flare X. I feel like this is cheating consumers by implying it will perform as well as other B-die memory will.
Well, look, B-die memory, like most things, is binned. So you get your really great CL14 stuff, your meh CL15 stuff, and then your not really good at all, just like doesn't make the cut almost, CL16, and then you get the defective stuff that you never hear about. I
think the thing is that
it's not false advertising.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was just going to say, if it's advertised as Samsung B-die at CL16 and it is a Samsung B-die and it runs at CL16 timings, then you've got what you've paid for. If you're trying to overclocking is always a bonus that you can get on top of what is advertised. So you're never going to be guaranteed overclocking of any product. Some people are going to be lucky and they'll be able to push it to CL15 or lower. And obviously in this buyer's case, they haven't been as lucky. That's just sometimes how it works.
Yeah, it's very different to something like a GT 1030 situation where you've got your GT 1030 GDDR5 version And then later on, they quietly push out a DDR4 version with nowhere near the same level of performance. That's much more dodgy, and we don't stand for that. But this, it's pretty clearly specified how it runs and all that sort of stuff, and it's memory. So the main thing you look at memory is the frequency that it operates at, and then the timings. And if they've made all that clear, then
yeah, it's just bad luck in this case.
Well, yeah, read some reviews, check some stuff out. If it's the same price as G-Skill's Flare X, then you definitely wouldn't buy the Gigabyte Aura stuff. You would buy the G-Skill Flare X.
Okay, so that's, I guess, all of the questions for our November Q&A. Lots of them. I think we've been at this for about an hour now, so plenty of fun stuff in the Q&A video. Of course, you can like this video, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, you can support us on Patreon to get access to stuff like our Discord chat, which is always a bit of fun throughout the month. It's actually been building quite nicely at the moment. Lots of discussion in there. Yeah, lots of discussion. We do our monthly live streams as well, which I'm sure you've heard about before. And I guess that's it. We'll see you in another Q&A, which will be happening in December as well.
Yep, probably late December, but it will happen in December.
We'll have some videos between now and then, though, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll work on something.
All right. See you next time.